Today we continue to look at what it means to be the message. So last week, what we did is we looked at really what it means to communicate with God, to hear God's voice in our life. Now, we learned that the gospel means good news, that the Spirit lives within us. Therefore, we're the gospel, we're the world, we're the gospel and the good news to the world that we live in. Now, one of the problems that we identified last week is our world is a distracted world. Our world is a busy world. Our world is a very cluttered world. And sometimes in all this busyness and all these distractions and all this clutter, it becomes very precarious or very difficult for us to hear God's voice. Now, one of the things we looked at last week was something that I've just observed and discovered, in my life, and that is that I believe that it is much more being who we are. Being is going to be much more significant than doing, or even how well it is that we do something. We are going to pay a very high cost, especially in the long term, when we value doing over being. Because the problem is because of illness, because we're not able to adapt to change, because of misfortune, because of the relentless predictability of aging, there's one day that we're going to have to stop doing the thing that gives us value. And all of a sudden, we have no more value anymore because we have placed our value in the wrong place. Our value should have always been based upon who we are. Now, who we are, our being, affects and has a high correlation to what we do. So who we are shapes what we do. Last week, one of the things, those of us who were here, we committed that, for 21 days, we're going to be a child of God for 21 minutes. I know a lot of you weren't here last week. Maybe some of you were here last week and you had good intentions, but it didn't work out. Maybe some of you were here last week and you thought it was a dumb idea. But I'm going to say it again for all of us. What I want to encourage us to do is for 21 days, just be for 21 minutes. What this means is you're giving God a whopping 1.4% of your day. That's what 21 minutes is. We gave you some tools to do that. The Gospel of John has 21 chapters. You just read a chapter a day. It takes like 3 or 4 minutes. We have an app. It's a really cool app. Download it. It's at weomaha.com. Every day there's a daily devotion. These are great. People in our church have been writing them. It's been a blessing for me when I wake up in the morning to read those things. If you want to be on that writing team, let us know. It's something we're going to continue to do beyond these 21 days. But it's just been great to read those things. We can pray for each other. We can listen to God. There's so many things that we can do. And I've heard such cool stories this week from people who have actually done this. There's a guy that called me up, I think it was like Thursday or Friday, and he's like, Craig, I didn't think I could do this. I didn't think I had that type of attention span. I didn't think I had that time. And gosh, it's been amazing. I've gotten some real practical lessons, and I just feel more connected to God, and it helps me throughout my day. And that's exactly what I was hoping to hear from some people. There's one family. There's 4 of them. There's a middle schooler, a high schooler, a mom and a dad. And what they do, they like 2 or 3 times this week, what they did is like right before dinner, they would all go do their 21 minutes in various places. They'd all listen to what God would speak to them. Then they would have dinner and they would share with each other, about what those 21 minutes look like. And this is cool stuff. I mean, this is we're getting rid of the distraction, the clutter, the busyness for 21 minutes, 1.4% of the day, and we're putting ourselves in environments where we can at least hear what God is trying to speak to us. Now, last week was listening to God's voice. This week is going to be finding our own voice. Now, let me take a poll. Who in here has a cell phone? I can't really see. It looks like a few of you do. Who in here has a smartphone? So there's 2. Got 2 of them. He counts for that person up there that doesn't have one, and so that means everyone has one. And so my observation is that we are a very connected people. We can text, we can talk, we can tweet, we can download games, we can play music, we can surf the internet. We're a very connected people. But my observation is that I don't think that many of us are going to be connected in the way that really matters the most. I think we're connected to a lot of people superficially. I'm not convinced that there's a whole lot of us that are connected really on a deep level in a way that matters most. Even though we have smartphones, I think that some of us are pretty dumb at meaningful communication. Last night was, it was either my least favorite night of the year or my most favorite night of the year. It depends how it goes. But last night was Amber's holiday work party. And usually, she comes with me and we go do things together. And this is the time that I do it with her. And I love doing it. I can't imagine not being there with you. And so she's a marriage and family therapist. So imagine spending 3 or 4 hours with 15 or 16 therapists and counselors and psychologists and psychiatrists, and they're analyzing me, I'm praying for them, and it's cool stuff. And now, if you had asked any of them though, if you had asked any of them why do you have so many people that want to come and talk to you? Why are you so busy that you have to actually say, no, I can't see you right now because I'm seeing too much? Why do you think that is? Well, most of them would say that it's communication. Most of them would say the greatest strain in relationships that we see today is people who love each other, unable to fully and functionally communicate with the other person. The greatest cause of conflict and confusion in our marriages, in our families, in our workplace, in the church, wherever, is going to be a breakdown in communication. Now, even though the little devices help us communicate more, do they really help us communicate more deeply? Now, as I talk about communication this morning, I don't want you to think about the world. I don't want you to think about Greater Omaha. I don't even want you to think about the larger church. What I want you to think about is the 2 or 3 or 4 people who are closest to you. Because I don't believe that we can be good news to the world. I don't believe that we can be good news to our city until we are good news to those who are closest to us. So I know that some of you are in the Air Force or the Army or the Navy or the Marines or whatever. You know from your schooling that when there's a war, what is the first thing that the Army tries to do or the Air Force tries to do? They try to knock out the communication of the enemy, because they know the enemy is almost defenseless when communication isn't happening. They can't counterattack, they can't defend when they can't communicate. And I think what the enemy tries to do to us is to break down our communication. I really think in our marriages, our families, our offices, our relationships, our churches, the enemy knows that if he can destroy the communication, then he can destroy the marriage, he can destroy the family, he can destroy the relationship, he can destroy the church, he can destroy the business. Now, I would say, just asking a question, is there a relationship in your life, and don't raise your hand, this is just for you only, is there a relationship in your life where there's a communication breakdown? Is there? And I think a lot of us, if we're honest, we say, yeah, there probably is. Maybe it's a coworker, a friend, a child, a spouse. No matter how hard we try, no matter the words we use, we just don't seem to be getting through. And my prayer this week has been that, if there's that breakdown in communication, I really pray that there can be a breakthrough. I just pray that the breakdown can be transformed into a breakthrough, and I pray that good communication can happen. So I want to go to a verse that we've looked at, the last couple weeks, and we're going to look at it again next week. It's John chapter 1, verse 14. Here the Bible says, "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth." So what's really interesting is Christ came to the world so that he could communicate with us. And he communicated with us very clearly, very, very powerfully, very effectively. And what I want to do is I want to look at how Jesus communicated with us to teach us how we can communicate with the people who are closest to us. Now, the first principle is before I open my mouth, I will open my heart. Okay, let's just take a quick poll here. You guys up for this? Who here has ever said something you wish you could just take back? Anybody? All right. There's almost as many as people who own cell phones. Chuck, have you done that one twice? You got 2 cell phones. I bet you've done this one twice. All right, so Jesus became human, okay? What God did is he opened up his heart to us before, like, you know, think about this. Like, Jesus was a baby, okay? He was frail and vulnerable. Has anyone here ever felt frail and vulnerable before? I think we have. I think that some of us are probably there now. Jesus, later in his life, he wept. He experienced rejection. He experienced sadness. We've been there and done that one as well. What Jesus did is he revealed his heart to us and became vulnerable. You know, he communicated the message of his life powerfully through his life. Now, if we're going to have a breakthrough in our communication, I believe that we need to act like God. We have to make ourselves vulnerable. You know, we can't hide, you know, what's under the surface. We have to communicate what's on our heart and what's on our mind. We can't pretend like we have it all together. We can't hide our weakness. We can't be so strong and so proud that we won't admit our hurts or our mistakes. So there's this guy that wanted to have like lunch with me, wanted to meet with me, and I met him on Wednesday. Do you guys know what the weather was like on Wednesday? Remember that day was like a balmy, like minus 50 or whatever it was, and we decided that we're going to meet for soup and a sandwich, and he knew what I looked like, and I kind of thought I probably knew it was him, and we saw each other out in the parking lot. So do you know the first thing he did when he came up to, I had never met him before, he said, "Craig," and I said, "Yeah." Do you know the first thing he did is he took off his right glove, and he wanted to shake my hand, and I took off my right glove, and we shook hands, and then we went inside and had the soup and the salad and the sandwiches, and what he did then was he just took off all the gloves, a different type of glove altogether, and he said, "Hey, I talked to so-and-so, and they said you might be able to, you know, at least listen to me or maybe help me with this a little bit." And man, he shared his failings, he shared his mistakes, he shared his fears. You know, here's this guy, I mean, you look at him, he's got it all together. He doesn't. You know, he became vulnerable. You know, and the deal is like, we're not going to get better until we can recognize where we are, until we can, you know, share that with other people who will accept us as we are. Now, this vulnerability thing, this trust thing, it's not easy. Yeah, I'm asking you to do something that's tough, and I know this. Like, I met a guy in the grocery store a few years ago. He goes to Faith Westwood still to this day, and like he saw me, and I always liked this guy. I thought he was great. You know, we had a little conversation, and he said, "Craig, it's just been placed in my heart that I want to pray for you." So we just gave him some stuff. I gave him some stuff right there in the grocery store. But you know what I did? I left my gloves on. I said, "You know, why don't you just pray? It's a busy time this week, and just pray that, you know, God multiplies my time and that I can get all the things done that I need to do. And, you know, just can you do that?" And he prayed. And so then, like, he started calling me up on Mondays, and he says, "Hey, it's, you know, so-and-so, I want to pray for you." And, you know, the first week, guess what I did? I left my gloves on. I wasn't ready to be vulnerable. I wasn't ready to risk. I wasn't ready to be real or authentic. You know, the second week, the third week, the gloves stayed on. You know, after doing this for like 4 or 5 weeks, there was finally a time I took one of my gloves off. And I said, "You know, I'm really struggling with this one thing. Like, it's just tough for me, and I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to move forward. You know, can you pray for me?" You know, so it's part of my week. Every Monday morning, he calls me. And the gloves were removed a long time ago. And because we're willing to take the gloves off, we can place ourselves in environments where healing and breakthroughs and communication can actually happen. Now, the reason we don't do this, it's simple. It's because we fear being rejected. You know, we fear being hurt. Now, let me tell you this. There's going to be a time that you should leave the gloves on. There is. You know, like, you know, when it's like 50 below out and you're outside, leave the gloves on. There's going to be a time when you leave the interpersonal gloves on as well. Gloves protect us from being hurt. Now, if you leave the gloves on forever, though, what the gloves are going to do is they're going to protect us from intimacy. They're going to protect us from breakthroughs. They're going to protect us from healing. So sometimes you got to take the gloves off. Now, the reason that we don't take the gloves off is because we're afraid of being hurt. 1 John chapter 4, verse 18, it talks about this type of fear. Such love, this is the agape love that God shows, has no fear, because perfect love expels all fear. If we're afraid, it is for the fear of punishment. And this shows that we have not fully experienced his perfect love. So we have this fear of rejection. It can absolutely be crippling. I think some of us might even be thinking right now, well, there is this conversation I need to have with this person, but man, this scares the heck out of me. What if they reject me? What if they get all defensive? What if they belittle my feelings? You have those fears, don't you? So this fear can also prevent us, from this type of healing that God wants to give to us. Now, Jesus, what did he do? How did Jesus? He did this. He would share how he felt. It is a risky thing to forgive somebody. It really is. But that's what Jesus did, and he's asking us to do the same thing. When Jesus didn't think something was quite right, he didn't just keep it in and say, well, I'll just let these people, run all over me. I'm going to share. And he did that. Now, in addition to, leading with his heart, the next thing that Jesus did is he moved into the world. So as we think about communication with other people, let's move into the world of the other people. Now, I want to read John chapter 1, verse 14 from another translation. This is a translation known as The Message. It's written by Eugene Peterson. He's a Greek scholar. So what he did is he read the Greek New Testament, and he wrote a paraphrase of what the Bible might sound like if it was written today. And here's what he came up with. The Word became flesh and blood, and then moved into the neighborhood. So if we want this type of relational healing, if we want to experience a breakthrough in our communication, one of the things that's going to be very helpful for us to do is to put ourselves into somebody else's shoes. To live their life, to move into their neighborhood. Now, the reason think about this, God is the one who took the initiative. God is the one who came to the world. The Word became flesh. It was his action. Now, if you want your relationship to be healed, if you want this breakthrough to happen, you got to take the next step. You got to make the move. It's not going to happen on its own. You can't depend upon the other person to make it happen. Now, Jesus, he came into our mess to give us his message of faith and hope and love and forgiveness. Now, moving into the world of the other person, it involves listening. It involves some work. A couple things I want us to think about is the first thing I think we can do is identify the needs of the other person. I would say this, for parents, have you ever asked your kids what they need? What is it that you need from me? I don't care if your kid's 6 years old or 36 years old. What do you need from me? What are the needs that you have in your life? What about a coworker? Someone that works with you or for you, or someone what do you need from me? What you're doing is you're creating a place of mutual expectations. Even in your small groups. We got dozens of small groups here at the church. I think it'd be really cool for some of the small groups just to go around and say to each other, what is it that you need from me? What is it that you need, and how is it that I can help you get that? And I think the next step then is going to be identifying the needs. The next one is going to be discovering the dreams. I think it would be really cool if some of our families just sat around the dinner table this week and just shared your dreams with each other. I think that'd be really cool. Just listen to the dreams of the other person, to move into their world, and let them tell you what their dreams are instead of you telling them what their dreams should be. I think that'd be cool stuff if we could identify these needs and discover these dreams. I remember one time when I was in seminary, I was, in the summers we weren't terribly busy. I was a youth minister, but we had some time. And one of the things that really interested me was homeless ministry. So I got myself connected with this guy named Kurt, and Kurt was a church planter. I just love Kurt. I thought he's a great guy. Kurt had a very interesting type of church that he started. It was called the Church in the Street. And his congregation was homeless men in downtown Atlanta. Now, I remember the first time that I was with Kurt, he took me around and he kind of showed me like what to do and not to do. And he said, well, just go talk to this person. Let's just see how it goes. And I went and talked to this person. And all of a sudden, I found myself, and I didn't know it at the time. I mean, Kurt pointed it out. I said, here's your needs. You need to get clean. You need to get on your feet. You need to get a job. I mean, I was telling the person something that they already knew. I said, your dreams are this and that. And, Kurt, pulled me away after we got done. He says, what in the world were you doing? He says, did you realize you're just, telling them what they already know? And I was like, gosh, I wasn't I? He says, do you play chess? And I said, yeah, I play chess. He says, go play chess with that guy over there. Like homeless men in Atlanta, they play chess. They got these little boards they wrap their pieces up in, and they take them with them at night. And I went over there, asked this guy if I could play chess. And I remember what Kurt had said, and we were just playing. And I said, so, what are your needs? What do you really need? And do you know what he needed wasn't actually what I thought he needed? I did my best there, and Kurt taught me this. I mean, I stumbled onto it, and then later in the match, he was actually getting ready to beat me, so I had to start talking about the dreams thing, and what do you dream about? What do you dream about in your life? You know what he said? He said, I just dream that I could have a relationship with my 3 kids. That's what I dream about. Now, that's not what I thought that he would have dreamt about. It makes sense once he said it, but I think the point is we need to listen here. We need to move into people's worlds. We need to identify people's dreams and identify their needs. Now, the next thing is going to be, and this next one is going to be the most important one. This thing is just so critical. Number 3 is going to be to speak and act in both grace and truth. Now, I want to let's look at this one again. John chapter 1 verse 14. I want us to look at that last sentence. So the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory and the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father. And how did he come? He came full of truth and of grace. Now, our voice is not going to have any power unless it has both truth and grace. When Christ communicated, he communicated with truth and grace. Remember the woman that was caught up in adultery, and what did Jesus communicated to her both truth and grace? Jesus said, your sin has been forgiven. Now go and sin no more. Now, the cheap grace of this would be your sin has been forgiven. If that's the only thing that Jesus would have communicated, she would have thought, okay, I got a blank check. I can just go out and do this over and over and over again. Now, if Jesus would have just communicated truth, he would have said, go and sin no more. So now all of a sudden, religion is going to be this dogmatic burden that God's love is going to be based upon her performance. But Jesus didn't communicate in that way. He communicated both. He said, your sin has been forgiven. Now go and sin no more. It's there's this forgiveness from the past and hope for the future. Now, this is cool stuff. Now, how this works, truth and grace are going to be necessary companions. Truth without grace is always going to be dogmatic and harsh. Grace without truth is going to be enabling a self-destructive behavior. Truth and grace together are going to lead to growth and life. So I remember my first sermon I ever gave. It was in a preaching class. I was a master's degree student at Emory University. And when I went to college, I didn't study communication. I didn't study Bible. I didn't study theology. I was so nervous to go and give this 8-minute sermon to my classmates, the teaching assistant, and the professor. I changed this thing. I worked probably harder on that one than I've ever worked on any sermon before. I went and I gave this thing, and I saw the tape. It was awful. I mean, it was probably the worst sermon I've ever heard, certainly the worst one I've ever done before. So the first person, we go through evaluations right there on the spot. So the first person to evaluate, the professor called this woman Sarah. She was from Alabama. Sarah was just like this sweet Southern woman, and she's like, well, Craig, it was interesting. You had a few good points in there. Thank you for sharing. Now, that was grace. I needed to hear more than that, though, didn't I? I mean, I wasn't going to get any better just by someone saying it was pretty good, it was interesting. So the next guy was the teaching assistant. His name was Ben. And Ben, looked at me, and he just that may have been the worst sermon I've ever heard. You missed the point of the text. Even if you did get the point of the text, you didn't apply it to the people. And your delivery, do you realize how bad of a speaker you are? So that's truth without grace. Now you can see that that's not going to do much any good either. At that point, I was thinking, okay, this is great. I've moved to this strange big city. I've quit my job. I'm not equipped to do something I feel that God might be calling me to do. And then the professor took over. And he's like, Craig, do you remember that day in the courtyard a couple weeks ago when we were out talking? I said, yeah. He says, I thought you were a really funny guy, and I can see a little bit of humor in this message, but I think in the future, why don't you just try to do a little bit more? And I think this is a natural style for you, and I think it's a gift to the church. And then he says, you're telling the story, and I think we just kind of got the tip of the iceberg. I think there was so much more underneath that, and Jesus told a bunch of stories, and I want you just to explore that a little bit more. He said, you were nervous, weren't you? And I said, yeah, I was nervous. I said, you probably changed it the last minute, didn't you? I said, yeah, I've been changing it all night. He says, what I want you to do next time is just 48 hours beforehand, just stop and just call it a day, you're done. Practice it once or twice the next day, practice it the morning before you come here, and just see how that works out for you. So that was amazing to me. All of a sudden, the grace and the truth were gone, but the grace and the truth together were amazing. I remember my senior year, my third year, my classmates got to pick, who was going to speak. There's 4 or 5 of us, and they nominated me to do it. And I remember Professor Kaiser came up after the sermon, and he just looked at me and he says, you've come a long way. And seriously, it wasn't that great of a sermon at the chapel, but I can tell you this. I don't think without his grace and truth that I would be here today. I just don't think that's the case. Now, Ephesians chapter 4, verse 15. Listen to what Paul says here. Instead, we speak the truth in love. We don't just speak the truth, we speak the truth in love, growing every way more and more like Christ. Now, seriously, don't speak the truth unless you're doing so in love. Because the truth without love, it can be devastating. Don't share the truth with someone to make you feel better. Share truth with grace because you care about the person. Now, here's how this might work in your life. Say if you have a teenager, and you agree that the teenager needs to be home at 11 o'clock. So say it's 11:50, and the kid finally comes home. Okay, so Grace says, hey, it's great to see you. I'm glad you're home safe. We'll see you in the morning, okay? Now, what is that going to do? That is going to create chaos and problems for everybody long term. Now, truth is going to say, you know what, 50 minutes ago you should have been here. You agreed and I agreed that you should have been home at 11 o'clock, and I've been home worried. You're not answering your phone. You're not answering your text messages. Now, that's truth, isn't it? But you can see how far that's going to get you too, right? So let's maybe do both truth and grace. It's hey, I'm glad you're home. Yeah, I was kind of worried about you. I want you to know I love you. Now, we agreed that you're going to be home at 11, right? Yeah, I said I was going to be home at 11, and we agreed that you're going to answer your phone, and yeah, we agreed on that. And so I just want you to I want to let you know, I love you. You're the most important thing to me. But it just doesn't feel good sitting here for these 50 minutes really worried that you're okay. We've set these boundaries for you because we love you, and Is it going to be possible for you, like next week, to make sure you're home at 11? Yeah, I can do that. It's like, that's not like the perfect conversation, but that conversation involves both grace and truth. Like, there's power in words. There's power in these words. Like, one of the things I do with the couples that I'm going to do weddings for is I actually ask them, I say, I just want you to, and I want you to do this right now. I want you to think of a time that somebody said something to you that was really hurtful. So you got it? So one of the things I do with the couples, I don't ask them what it was. I don't ask them who said it. What I ask them is, how long ago did that event happen? And inevitably, it was months ago. Sometimes it was years ago. Sometimes it was decades ago. And that just goes to show you the power of words as we communicate with one another. Now, the last thing we're going to look at, we've opened our hearts, we've moved into the worlds of the people, discovering their needs and dreams. We've acted and spoke with both truth and grace. The last thing I want us to look at just real quick is that we're going to call on Christ before we speak. Now, I got to do this one a lot. Like, sometimes I'll go into tough situations and I just don't know what to pray. I don't know what to say, and I'll say, like, God, you gotta help me out with this one. Sometimes as a parent, like, these kids like don't come with an instruction manual. Have you guys ever noticed that? And like, you don't know how to like discipline, you don't know how to love, you don't know how to combine the two together, and it's like, God, just help me to be the parent that these kids need me to be. So let's look at Jeremiah chapter 33, verse 3. It's like, call to me and I will answer you and tell you great and unsearchable things that you do not know. Now, I go back to this verse a lot. This verse, it means a lot to me. There's times I just don't feel I connect to people. There's times when it's tough for me to articulate the vision that God might be giving me. There's times when I'm just trying to have a breakthrough instead of a breakdown in a relationship. And I remember those words, call to me, and I will answer you. I will open up the great and unsearchable things that you do not know. I remember it was about 15 years ago on New Year's Eve. I got a call from the hospital, and I was one of the pastors in the town. And there's like 2 or 3 of us that were kind of like the volunteer go-to chaplains. And they called me. I was getting ready to go home, and I got to the emergency room. And usually it's not that big of a deal. But I just saw in the nurse's face like there was something that had gone wrong. I said, hey, what's going on? And it turned out there was a hunting accident, and a man had died. I remember I went back into that room, and I was praying the whole way there, and it was like probably 15, 20 seconds. Like, God, just give me some words to say. Like, just give me something that's going to help these people a little bit. Help me give your message to them, because that's the thing that they need the most. I remember I walked into that room, and I left probably 10, 15 minutes later. And I had never felt like such a complete failure in ministry. I mean, this was a lot worse than that first sermon I tried to give. Just awful. I was like, I did not help them. I didn't say anything of any value at all. I have let these people down. Yeah, I went home, and the next day or two we planned a funeral, and this man died way too young, and I left that worship service that day thinking that I just did not do him, I did not do God what needed to happen. I remember this just happened a few years ago. I got a letter from the wife of the deceased, and I hadn't heard from her since I left that little town. And she said, hey, I don't know if you remember, but it was 10 years ago today. My husband died in a hunting accident. And she said, I'll never forget the words that you said in the hospital that day. I'll never forget the words that you spoke at his funeral. Now, the point is, this has absolutely nothing to do with me. Remember, I felt like a failure. I don't even remember what I said. But I really believe that when we find ourselves in those situations, call upon God, and he will give us wisdom to unsearchable and unknowable things. That when we tap into his resources, we can do what he can do. that God can have us be the message through him. And even if we feel like a failure, we're just planting seeds that God is the one who is responsible harvesting for. And I want to tell us this, as we go out into the community this week, as we go back into our homes, as we go back into our offices, I want us to think about those people that matter the most to us, those people who are the closest to us. And I want us to invite us to open up our hearts, before we speak, and just keep listening to God and speak God's word to them. I want us to move into their neighborhoods, to try to walk into their shoes, to discover their needs and their dreams. When we speak, I want us to speak with both grace and truth, because when you blend those two things in together, there's going to be a holy conversation that's going to happen. And I want us to call upon God when things just get too tough, when they become unmanageable for us, to call upon God and have him help us communicate, because that's what he does. So let's pray.